All right, we're back again with another series in the next tutorial. All right, so this time around, we're going to be starting with writing code. We're going to write code today. So I assume that you have already installed your PyCharm, and then so that we can start writing code. I assume everything has been set up properly for you to begin. So now the first thing you want to do is to click on your search bar and type PyCharm. When you type PyCharm, you should see the application that you have installed. Now, since we have this, we want to pin it to our taskbar. So you will see something there, and when you see your app pop up, by your right hand side like this, you should see something that says pin to taskbar. So I have already pinned mine to my taskbar. That's why it's telling me on pin from taskbar here. So without wasting time, just click on the application to open up the PyCharm, then we'll let it load. We will let it load. All right, so wait for it to load. Wait for it to load. All right, so when it loads, now because I've already started writing projects on my PyCharm, yours should give you a blank screen without anything being there. So yours should give you a blank screen. So now, if you're to an already existing project, so it will be empty, obviously. So you will see a place that says new project. So mine, because I've already started, I already have an already existing project. So I will need to click on those dots, those three dots that you saw, and then I'll come here to a new project. Now you just click on new project. It will be on your screen when you start your PyCharm. So I will just call it variables and simple data types. So variables and just say data types. Data types. And you click. Now, before you click create, you want to tick on your create Git repository and create a welcome script. Although Git repository is not necessary, but just click on it. Something I do is it's a good practice, because if you want to share your code with somebody else on GitHub, you will need to create a GitHub repository. First of all, a GitHub account if you don't have, and then you create a GitHub repository that you would push your project to. So the repository would be like a branch, an environment that you're going to push your code to if you plan on sharing your code. All right, that's by the way. So click enter or click create, and I'll say this window, and then it should create a new project for me. So, what are variables and data types? All right, so variables and data types, they are the foundational blocks of every programming language. They are the foundations upon which we write code. So without variables or data types, you can't write code in any programming language at all. So it doesn't matter the programming language you are trying to learn or you are trying to use. If you don't have knowledge of variables and data types, you can't write code, period. Now we have, so variables, we start with the definition of variables. Variables are empty containers that can be assigned a value. You can give them any name you want. You can give them any name you want. They're empty containers that can be assigned a value. But provided you don't start them with a number. They can start with an underscore, they can start with a letter, but they cannot start with a number. And if you are trying to write a variable that has two names and then you are trying to separate them with a white space, you would get an error. A variable should be joined together with an underscore. So that's what a variable is. It's an empty container that can be assigned a value. Now, what's a value? A value is determined by a data type. So we can say a data type, this is an object, because we call almost everything in programming objects. So this is an object that determines the value that a variable can have. That's what a data type is. It's an object that determines the value that a variable can have. So I'm going to start with the string data type. String data type. So this is a data type that allows us to put characters within double or single quotes. So this is a data type that allows us to put characters within double or single quotes. Of course, we know that data types determine the values that a variable can have. So our value is going to be written with double or single quotes and assigned to a variable. So now, since that is out of the way, we know what a variable is and a value is. So we have string values and we have numerical values. And the data type determines the value. So we can say that a value is the same thing as a data type. Does it make sense? These things will get clearer to you. So a value is the same thing as a data type because the data type determines the value that a variable can have. So that value at that point in time that you are assigning to a variable is a representation of that data type. To get clearer, don't worry. So now you want to come here to the name of your folder, that is the project you just created, and right click on it. When you right click on it, you come here to new, then you scroll down here to Python file. So I'll give it a name. I'll just call it V and D. So I will use camel case, so small letter V, capital letter A and D, then D. V and D, as variables and data types. Press enter. All right, add. So now we know what we're talking about, we know what we're about to do here. So now the first thing I want to do is to create a variable called name, and I want to assign it a value of Alex. Now, this Alex I've assigned to this variable here, the value was determined by the data type. Python doesn't let you to explicitly define the data type of a value. It does it on runtime. That's why after this my tutorial series, I would create a tutorial series on Java so that you would know that in a working or in a proper programming language, you must specify your data type. But Python does all this for you at runtime when you're about to run your code. But the data type determines the value of this variable. The data type can also be, now the value can be seen as a representation of that data type. Now, because I've done this, name is now the ID, the identification, what I use to identify this value. So anywhere I try to use name, I'm using Alex. Does that make sense? So now you come here, come down here, you see print. Now, print is an inbuilt function that allows us to print out the value that a variable is holding. So after you've done this and you've typed your code, you come here, up here, and change it from main to current. So you notice that we generated a Python file when we created our project. This is the Python file here, main, that allows us to use a function to print out some code. We'll get here and I'll explain all this for you, but let's not jump. Now, when I click play, you will discover that it prints out Alex to my console. You can see Alex here. So why did I do that? Because this is the assignment operator. This is what we use to give this value called Alex to this variable called name. And when I say print name, it's going to print out the value that the variable is holding. All right. So that's that for string values. So now let's look at. So this one is now this topic is naming and using variables. So you put a hash. So now we have what we call commenting. So naming and using variables. Now commenting simply means you are hiding a line of code or some lines of code from the Python interpreter. That Python interpreter we installed is what allows us to be able to run our code. That's what even allows us to give a result in the first place. Because normally, on a normal basis, your computer doesn't understand what we are writing. It takes the work of that interpreter that we installed in our previous tutorial to be able to give us this result. This is how you name and use a variable. Name. Now, let's look at changing case in a string with methods. So we talked about, if you can remember, I talked about functions. So another name for functions is called method. So changing case in a string with methods. So we have two types of functions or methods, which are inbuilt methods and user-defined methods. We're going to look at user-defined methods later on in this course. Now, an input method is a function that already has code. Now, you cannot see the code. All you are to do is just to use that function to execute your program. So a classical example of an input function is the print function. It allows us to display the result of a variable or a value to our console, which you can see here. So now we want to look at three types of functions that allows us to change case in a string. So the first one is title, the title function or method. The next one is upper, and the other one is lower. Now the title allows us to change the first letter in a string to capital letter. The first letter to capital letter. This one is already capital, so there's no need for that. So it allows us to change it to capital letter. The upper function allows us to change everything to capital letter. The lower allows us to change everything to small letter. So I'll start with title. Title. Before I start with that, I'll create a variable called detail. I'll assign it a value. Now you can use single quotes. Python does not discriminate, but Java does. So let's not get distracted. So in for main So I want to change only just the first letter to capital letter. I'll come here and say print detail title. Now this will change just the first letter alone and everything to small letter. So if I run the code, see that I get. Well, let me comment out the previous one that we did. So that we don't have the code running and confusing us. Comment it out and then run. Then you will discover that to print out information. Changing, just maintaining the first letter as capital and every other thing will be small letter. Yeah, so you see we have that. So now the next thing, so since I'm still using that same variable value, I will not comment it out, but I will comment out the print. So I want to see how we can use the upper. See print. The upper allows us to change everything to capital letter. So upper, if I run that, see that we have information. You can see how I wrote it initially, small letter, capital. I just mixed it so that I can be able to apply each of these functions properly to it, and you will see the difference. So that's that. And the next one is lower. So lower would allow us to change everything to small letters. Detail lower. If you run your code, you will see that everything will change to small letter. So that's how you can change a case in a string with methods. So like I said, we have inbuilt methods. So methods are or functions, they are multiple lines of code written in a container that allow us to execute a program. Now you can see that the programs that this one was trying to do was to change only the first letter to capital letter and everything to small letter. And the program that this one was trying to execute was to change everything to capital letter. And also the program that this other function was trying to execute was to change everything to small letter. I hope that makes sense. So we would be continuing. So now let's now look at using variables in a string. So using variables in a string. Variables in a string. Now what does this mean? This simply allows us to use the value of a variable as the value that we have assigned to a variable while we are inside a string. We're trying to read or use the value of a variable while we are inside another string. That's what it means. Let me explain that. So I can create a variable called data or name data. Name underscore data is equal to Adam and another variable called age. Now I'm going to explain numerical values later, but I want to use it here so that I can explain a specific part of this topic to you. So I can create a variable and say print. I can make a sentence with it. Now the first thing, so we said that using a variable in a string is when we read or access the value of a variable, as we access the value assigned to a variable while we are inside another string. Now the first way we can do that is using the f string. F string. So I'll just say f string. Now I'll make a sentence. Say print f. Hello there. Hello there. name data you are, so you are age. What will happen now? Before I run this code, I want to explain what's happening. Now, the letter F is going to read the value stored inside name data. That's this Adam. Take that value and use that value to replace this name data with the curly bracket. So by the time I run the code, you will discover that this name data will not be here again and this curly bracket, but we're going to have Adam. It will say, hello there, Adam. Now, also, the letter F2 is also going to read the value stored inside age, which is 34. Take that value and use that value to replace this curly bracket with age inside. So that when I run the code, you will see we get, hello there, Adam, you are 34. Now, if I remove the letter F, you will discover that nothing will be read inside these variables. It will just print them out just the way they are. Hello there, curly brackets, name data, you are age. Hope that makes sense. Hope that makes sense. So that's what we mean by using variables in string. Now the next one is called the format method. So format. Now format, now you won't believe me if I tell you this. F string is the short form of format in Python. So it's a short form to write format. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write the same sentence so that we don't digress. We keep it consistent and able to still across information. Hello there, you are. Say dot format. All right. See name data. Name. All right. So what's happening here? Now I'll tell you. So the same thing. The format is doing the same work as the letter F. Now the format would read the value inside name data, which is Adam. Take that value, take Adam and use Adam to replace the first curly bracket. Now, why is he replacing the first curly bracket? It was because it was written first before age. So, assuming age was written before name data, then it will read the value inside age, which is 34. Take it and replace this. But because age was written after, the format would read the value inside name data, which is Adam. Take that value and replace this empty curly bracket. Also, the format would also read the value stored inside age, which is 34. Take that value and replace this second empty curly bracket. So that when I run the code, you see I get the exact same thing. So the reason why I was printing out this previous one was because I didn't comment it out. So you comment it out as a good practice. So you click play again and you discover that it prints out just one sentence. So you see that we get the same thing. So I'm trying to show you consistency. That's why I'm showing you the different ways of reading values in a variables while they are inside another string. Now the next one is C style string. C style. Why is it called C style string? It's because part of Python was written in the C language and Python adopted the way that C language uses to read values stored in a variable while you are using it inside another string. Now I'm going to write the same sentence. Hello there, percentages, you are percentage D. So what does this mean? Just hold your horses, hold your horses. I would explain. So name, data, age. Now the percentage is doing the same work as the format and the F. This percentage symbol here that you are seeing is doing the same work as the format and the letter F. So it's going to read the value inside name data, take that value and use it to replace percentage S. It will also read the value stored inside age, take that value and use it to replace percentage D. Now, take note, percentage S, percentage D. Percentage S represents string values. Percentage D represents numerical values. Numerical values. That's what percentage D represents. Integers to be specific. So because this value is an integer, which we will look at later, I need to use percentage D to represent it so that when I use percentage outside, now take note of the percentage outside the quotation. This percentage would read the value inside name, data, and age, take those values and use them to replace percentage S and percentage D respectively. If I change it to percentage S, I will get an error. I'll get a problem. So you see, I still get 34 anyway, but it's going to treat it now as a string value. You hover over it, you see, it tells me int, but it has used the percentage S now to represent the percentage D. But this one would give you problems when you are looking at numerical calculations. You're trying to calculate maybe add two numerical values together. Of course, obviously, you cannot add string values together. So you need to use it in its proper format, D. So that's why we use percentage %D, which is proper. So that makes sense. All right. So that's that. So that's how you can read a value stored inside a string. That's how you can read a value stored inside a string. Three different types of string formatting methods. All right. So let's continue. Let's proceed. Now let's look at adding white spaces with tabs or new lines. So adding white spaces. So adding white spaces with \t and \n. Now, \t simply does the same work as when you press tab on your keyboard, and \n does the same work when you press enter on your keyboard. So I can create a variable called a I'm really out of variable names. I will just call it tech. I open up quotation mark, and I can say \t, and I'll say Python. Now take note, before I print this out and come here and say print tech. Now when I run, now if you notice the previous code I wrote before, you can see that hello is on the same line with the C. You can see it aligns properly. But the moment I run this, you will discover that Python there will be an indentation from the C before you see Python printed out. So that's what the \t does. So it does the same work as your tab. You can see that indentation. So that's what it does. Let's now look at new line. So I'll comment this out and I'll show you new line. Like I'll just say program meeting. All right, so now I have another one, program. So here I'll come here and put \n. Now what will happen is that it's going to take this meeting to a new line. Now you can see that this Python is very close to this part, this text written. It's very close. Now the moment I run this code, you will discover that there will be a visible white space before you see meeting below. So meeting will be printed out, but there will be a visible white space before meeting. So I'll click on play. Now you can see that white space, right? I see that space. But because I did not use \t, that's why meeting is still on the same line. You can also add \t if you wanted to, and you discover that it will indent. It will first take it to a new line, then it will indent it. You see that? See that meeting is not on the same line as C, and at the same time there's a white space, a visible white space. This is how you add white spaces. Now let's look at removing white spaces. So removing white spaces. So in order for this to make more sense, I'm going to add another new line after meeting so that you understand what I'm talking about. Now we have different functions for removing white spaces. So we'll look at the L strip first of all. We'll look at the R strip. We'll look at the strip. Now, the L strip, just as the name implies, L strip, left strip, allows us to remove white spaces from the left-hand side. So what am I going to do? I'll say print. Now, I'm going to print out the one I used \t for tech, which is Python. Let me take it down so that you can see the code properly. So I'm going to remove white spaces from the \t from Python. So it is called tech. I'll say tech dot L strip, and this will remove the white space from tech. If I click enter, it will take it back to its original position. You can see that Python is back. Okay, let me comment out the previous one so that you will not get confused. So if I run this, you will see that Python will be back to its original position on the same line as C. You see that? So that's what the L strip does. Now let me apply the R strip. So the R strip, I'm going to apply R strip to meeting. Now, let me print out meeting first before I apply the R strip so that it will make more sense to you. So you notice that here for meeting, I created a new line at the left-hand side and at the right-hand side. Now, what will happen is that there will be a new line, a white space at the top of meeting, and after meeting, there would also be a white space. Now, take note of this white space that pops up after Python has been printed out. This one is normal, it's natural. Because it's an IDE. It's because it's an IDE. That's the reason why this white space is there. We can, the moment I add a new line after I've printed out some text or some string, this white space will be doubled. That's what you need to know. So I'll come here and I'll print out meeting. So print program. Program. And when I print this out, you will see that there will be a white space at the top and an even bigger white space at the bottom. Now, in order to remove the white space at the right hand side, you see dot R strip. Now this is going to remove this white space and reduce it a little bit. Don't forget there's a default white space here already. So if I say R strip to remove that white space, you can see it's smaller. So this is the normal white space. But you can see that white space is still there at the left hand side. The white space at the left hand side is still there, \n. So that's what happens. Now let's now look at strip alone. I'll come here and say print. So let me comment this out. Now the strip allows us to remove white spaces from both sides, from both the left and right hand side. You see, strip. And this will remove white spaces from the left and from the right hand side, and you see that we get meeting back to its original position. That's how you remove white spaces from your code. All right, so that's that. Let's look at avoiding syntax errors in strings. So you can avoid syntax errors. If I create a variable called name and I say, let me just say name2 because I've created name before, equal to Samson, and I come here and say print name2. Now you can see you get a red underline already. It already tells you there's an error. But if you still persist, if you are still stubborn, you come here and you click on play, it will tell you name2 not defined, name error. So later on we would learn how we can catch all these type of errors and do something else in place of an error. But for now, you can see that here this is an error and you want to avoid this. So now, so far we know how to highlight or hide a single line of code. How about hiding multiple lines of code? How do we do that? We do that by using either double quotes or single quotes 3 times. So I can come here, highlight my code and say 1, 2, hold on, sorry. I come here and say 1, 2, 3. Now you can see that you comment the top where the code started from and the bottom where the code ended, and to just hide the code in between. That's how you can hide multiple lines of code. So if I run my code, you see that nothing gets printed out because Python has hidden those lines of code. So you want to really avoid name errors, something you really want to do. Now let's now look at numbers, integers and floats, like so numbers. So now we have, I can create a number, I'll say num1 is equal to 34. I can come here and say print out num1, and you will see that it will print out 34 for me. So you can also assign a numerical value to a variable and print it out. You understand? Now you can also decide to add values together. I can say num1 is plus 3. So you can just come here and create a new variable. I'll call it result. Result is equal to num1 plus num2. Let me change it to num2. Num2. 1 plus num2. You can now use the result to make a sentence. You can say f string. Say addition of num1 and num2 is result. And you can get your proper sentence. So you get addition of 34 and 43 is 77. You can see that that makes sense. Okay, so you can also perform other types of numerical operations like division, subtraction, multiplication. So I'll just show you the different symbols. I'll put them in a hash so that you can set up them. You can, for multiplication, this is multiplication. For division, this is division. For addition, which we have just done, this is it. For subtraction, like this. For modulo, so modulo is when you divide two numbers together and you print out the remainder, not the result. So that's what we mean by modulo. It will come in handy later on in this course. We'll look more at it properly. That's just what you have. Yeah. So now we can also convert from decimal numbers to whole numbers and from whole numbers to decimal numbers. You can just come here and say decimal, create a variable called decimal and say 45.32 and create another variable and say whole is equal to 47. So how do I convert that decimal to a whole number? We have a function called int. I'll say print int decimal. So I'm converting it to a whole number. Now, these integers are whole numbers from negative infinity to positive infinity. For those of us that did mathematics, in short, it's a general thing that everyone should know. All right, so it's going to convert it to just 45. It will remove the 32 and we'll just have 45. So let me comment out the previous one again that I did so that I will not confuse us. So you see, you get 45 printed out. It has stripped away the 32. Now, what of for the 47? How do we make it a decimal number? We have a function in Python called float that allows us to convert whole numbers to decimal numbers. You just come here and say print. You just say float. In parentheses, we're going to convert this value that I assigned to 47 to a decimal. So it's going to add point 0 to 47. That's how it converts to a decimal. 0.0. All right, so that's all right. So we know about integers and floats. So what of multiple assignments? How do we assign values, multiple values to multiple variables? So multiple assignments. Assignments. So this is when we assign multiple values to multiple variables on a straight line. So I can create a variable called name, age, and then course is equal to Alex 34 and 6. I can use all of them to make a sentence. I can come here. All right, so hold on. I don't want to use the same name that I used before. I just say age 3, name 3. You just come here and say print. Hello, name 3. You are 3 years. You can print out another sentence here. Say print. You study. You study course. This will make a sentence with all of them. Hello, Alex. You are 34 years. You study physics. Okay. So these are simple programs that we can just get used to. So that's how you can assign multiple values to a variables on a straight line. So what of constants in Python? We don't have constants in Python. But in order for us, so if we know that we're going to forget a value we created, we can write it with capital letter, such as this. So this can remind you that you are not expected to change the value of this variable. It can remind you that you're not expected to change the value of this variable. Now we also have underscore in numbers. Sorry, we also have underscore in Python. Python allows us to use underscores for large numbers. So as an example, somebody might decide to write something like this: 1 million. Error. Python doesn't understand what you are doing here. This is a problem. 1 million. This is a problem. Python doesn't understand you. So in order for Python to understand what you are doing, come here and say, print it out, and you just have, see, Python has changed it to like a tuple. So this doesn't make any sense. So you can't do something like this for large numbers. So you can use underscore to bridge numbers together so that Python would know what you are talking about. So by the time I print this out, Python would remove the underscore and join them together because it already knows what I'm trying to do. So it will just remove the underscore and bridge them together, and we have our million. So that's that. So that's all for today's tutorial. That's all about variables and simple data types. Now we have other functions in Python, other input functions that you can use. Which we are going to treat in our subsequent tutorials. So till we meet again. Have a very good day.